During the years he worked on the novel, he was in and out of various jobs, and for long periods didn't work at all in order to concentrate on his writing. Ellison's wife carried the burden of supporting them, and when he got discouraged, she encouraged him to keep going because she believed in his writing career. 7 years later, he completed his novel and was worn out and filled with worries that his years of persistence might not pay off. Invisible Man was on the bestseller list for 13 weeks, and its huge success suddenly shot Ellison to the top of the literary field. In 1953, he received the National Book Award, one of America's most prestigious literary prizes. The book's popularity led to Ellison being selected as a fellow at the American Academy of Arts and Letters in Rome 2 years later.
Basically, if you are without economic power in America, you are invisible to a certain extent. African Americans basically found it very difficult, and still find it very difficult in many instances, to be identified as a person of merit.
In 1964, he published Shadow and Act, a collection of essays written early in his career. With earnings up by 1967, Ellison purchased the spacious country home in Plainfield, Massachusetts that his wife had dreamed about since their early years of their marriage. Later that same year, in November, tragedy struck when a fire ruined his property and destroyed nearly 350 pages of a second novel. The 1960s was a turbulent period when African Americans struggled for human rights and pressed into being a national civil rights bill.
He has been criticized, or was criticized, by many of the radicals of the 60s and the 70s because they felt that Ellison should identify more with Africa. But what Ellison did was take the American culture and the African American culture and said that you basically could not separate the two, that both have borrowed and intermingle with each other, so on a cultural level. One could not distinguish and say this is solely African American culture, because African American culture is a combination of Africans in America and American culture.
For no group within the United States achieves anything without asserting its claims against the counterclaims of other groups. Thus, as Americans, we have accepted this conscious and ceaseless struggle as a condition of our freedom, and we are aware that each of our victories increases the area of freedom for all Americans, regardless of color. I see a period when Negroes are going to be wandering around because we have had this thing thrown at us for so long that we haven't had a chance to discover what in our background is really worth preserving. For the first time, we are given a choice. We are making a choice. And this is where the real trouble is going to start. Freedom must be won again and again.
Ellison continued to be recognized for his literary achievements. In 1969, he was awarded the Medal of Freedom by President Lyndon Johnson. The next year, Ellison was named Professor of Humanities at New York University. Ellison took a trip back to his hometown in 1975 when the city named a branch library after him.
I have no doubt that within these walls other writers, black, white, Indian, will emerge. The library is a place where we are able to free ourselves from the limitations of today by becoming acquainted with what went on in the past, and thus project ourselves into the future.
He was honored in 1985 with the National Medal of Arts Award, and the next year his essays were published in Going to the Territory.
The diversity of American life is often painful, frequently burdensome, and always a source of conflict, but in it lies our fate and our hope. You just write for your own time, while trying to write in terms of the density of experience, knowing perfectly well that life repeats itself. Even in this rapidly changing United States, it repeats itself. The mystery is that while repeating itself, it always manages slightly to change its mask.
His unfinished work, Lost in the Fire, was never completed, Ellison died of pancreatic cancer in his home in New York City on April 16, 1994.
When we read Ellison, Ellison loves American folklore, African American folklore and art. In his work, he gives the spiritual side of African Americans, that aspect of African Americans that revitalizes the community, the creativity, the joy which comes out of the culture, the self-awareness. Now, Ellison gives us self-awareness. Then comes the writers of the 60s and 70s who say self-determination. We are going to determine our future. So his legacy is that he is the connecting link. He gets us from invisibility, from protest into self-determination. And I think that's his greatest contribution.